Welcome to the Smart Business Revolution.
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 You want a revolution?
You say you want a revolution?
Revolution. The revolution.
It's going on right now.
Welcome to The Revolution, the Smart Business Revolution podcast, where we ask today's most successful entrepreneurs to share the tools and strategies they use to build relationships and connections to grow their revenue. Now, your host for The Revolution, John Corcoran.
All right, welcome everyone. John Corcoran here. I am the host of this show, and you guys know my story. I'm a recovering political hack, recovering lawyer. I spent years working in politics, including as a speechwriter, stints working in the Clinton White House for a California governor, and spent years practicing law in Silicon Valley and San Francisco. And 10 years ago, I discovered this medium of podcasting, and I've been doing it ever since. And over 10 years of hosting the show, I've had such a great privilege to talk with top CEOs, founders, and entrepreneurs of all kinds of companies and organizations, ranging from YPO to EO, Activation Blizzard, LendingTree, many more. I'm also the co-founder of Rise25, where we help B2B businesses with the strategy and production they need to create a podcast and content marketing that produce a tremendous ROI and connects them with their ideal prospects and referral partners. And I'm excited today to have as our guest, Dean Dutro. He's the co-founder of Worth eCommerce. And what they do is they help companies with email marketing. He's also the host of the Relationship Commerce podcast, which we're fortunate to help him with. And so we're going to be talking about email. Is it relevant today? Does it continue to work? How has it changed over the years? And all those sorts of things. So if you're curious about using email to make sales, particularly in the e-commerce context, then this is going to be a really valuable episode for you. But first, before we get into that, this episode is brought to you by Rise25. Rise25, my company, we help B2B businesses to get clients, referrals, and strategic partnerships with done-for-you podcasts and content marketing. If you're listening to this, you've ever thought, should I start a podcast? Well, I've been saying for 10 years, you should, no matter what. It's one of the best things you'll ever do. Tremendous tool for up-leveling your network and meeting great people and having great conversations with my guest here today. So if you want to learn more about how to do it, go to rise25media.com. We're happy to tell you more about it. All right, Dean, such a pleasure to have you on here. And now you are known as an expert in email marketing, email copy, helping e-commerce businesses, which is just such a massively growing area of the economy right now, to generate more revenue using email. And so naturally, of course, the training for that is to go straight out of college into being an aviation recruiter, right? Which is what you did. I'm joking, of course, but how did you go from you studied communications in college to aviation recruiter, flying around the country, convincing colonels that you know how to hire staffing for them? That seems nuts.
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of a wild story in itself. And I always say that was the best job I ever had, was being in aviation sales and recruiting, specifically for staffing. And when I got out of college, I'd studied communications, which was kind of like a throwaway major in some sense. Like it was just important to me to go to college, be the first in my family to do so, and loved learning how to connect with people, loved learning how to public speak, loved learning persuasion, things like that. And so recruiting was really just like the first real job I got. And it just like randomly someone called me, a recruiter called me and was like, "Hey, it looks like you've done sales before," which I'd done at a hotel. And they're like, "Do you want to come work with us?" I was like, "Sure." They're offering like $43,000 a year, which was insane to me at the time, just being out of school way back in the day. And, they interviewed me, and how I got chosen for aviation, because they had other divisions, was like, I grew up, my dad was like a motorcycle guy. And so like they thought I could connect with like aviation guys who often like ride Harleys and are kind of nomads and things like that. So I was like, yeah, sure, I can do this. And it ended up being pretty amazing. We would, get hired for these contracts, like in, somewhere in like Louisiana, where they would need 100 contractors to help rebuild some airplanes. And so we would try to get those contracts, and then myself and a team of aviation recruiters would find the people to move to Louisiana to do these contracts, for example, or to Vegas or to Florida or to different places in Idaho. And so I was like 24, literally just flying all over the country with an expense card, staying in hotels, talking to aviation guys about what we could do, why they needed us, figuring out what their pain points were, and then telling our team to like, hey, let's go find 100 people. So it was really, really kind of interesting. And I think the skill that I learned from that was recruiting, right? Like, which I think is such a huge skill in any business, but that's kind of how that came about. And it turned out, I really enjoyed it, but my best friend from college approached me one year. He stayed with me for like a month. He was this digital nomad for a while. And that concept to me, I discovered through like Tim Ferriss and those kind of guys. And he was actually living it. He was living in Europe, stayed with me in Portland for a month and was like, hey, I'm doing UX design. I'm a freelancer. I want to start an agency. Do you want to join? And I was like, yeah, let's do it. Kind of showed me some numbers. And within a month, I quit my job that had been out for years. And him and I moved to Asia to start this agency and be digital nomads and do UX design, which I had no idea what that even meant back in the day.
Why Asia? Just because it'd be fun or because it's a cheaper cost of living?
Yeah, cheap. This is like 2015, 2016. So we thought Asia would be cheap. We wanted to explore. I love traveling and I've lived overseas before and just thought it would be a really cool experience. And, ultimately that agency ended up failing. After about a year, we kind of decided to part ways. And I think we didn't really have like a mission or values or anything. Like we wanted to like make money and be at the beach and drink beers and like travel the world. And it just didn't lend to like growing something that could last or help other people. And so we ended up like both of us, I moved into my grandma's house and he moved into his grandma's house. And we kind of went our own ways for about a year. And it just so happened while we were doing UX design that one of the companies called Qualimattress based in Australia had asked us if we wanted to do their email marketing. In my mind, I was like, I've never done this, but yeah, if they're going to pay us $1,000, I'll do it, or whatever back then. And I just learned as much as I could about email, took kind of my communication knowledge from school and applied that and created an email system for them out of scratch, and it ended up doing well. And we sent some campaigns, sent some emails. We saw money come in like that day. And I was like, this is pretty awesome that we can send out some emails and it makes money and we can see that, like track that really easily. And so it just kind of evolved. I started becoming a freelancer in email marketing after that. This was 3 or 4 years ago.
And you didn't have a background in UX design, right?
No, not at all.
Yeah. Was there, do you connect it now to having more of an interest or a passion? Is there a difference between the two? Do you feel like more passionate about email than you did about UX design, or did that make a difference?
I think to me, the passion wasn't the medium, right? So the passion for me was, how can I help other businesses grow, right? And I just so happened to stumble into email. And that idea came from like my parents were entrepreneurs, my grandparents were entrepreneurs, and they always struggled getting past a certain point. So it's not like they were like super wealthy, but they just had their own little small businesses. I always thought it'd be cool. Like, what if they would have done something else or tried something else that could have helped them grow faster? And so I just really stumbled into email. I liked how it was something that was fast, where you could send out an email to 1,000 people, 10,000, 100,000 people, and you could predict the revenue that would come in. So I wouldn't say I have a passion for it. I always tell my team now, like, I'm not the email expert you guys are. I'm trying to grow this business and help other people grow as well. Yeah.
And what did you learn from your parents and grandparents being entrepreneurs? Because that's interesting to me, because no one in my family was an entrepreneur that I know of, at least in recent generations.
Yeah, that could either be a decent success or a failure. My mom's business never really got off the ground. She tried really hard. My grandma's business, she ended up selling when she retired. But I think what I learned from it is that by starting your own business, you have a lot of freedom. What was great growing up is every sporting event, every vacation, like they never had to ask for PTO. Like they just did it. Right. Yeah. And I like that, like having that kind of lifestyle control. And that was really important to them. And I think that's something I learned from them.
Cool. So you figured out that you could sell mattresses to Australians, and naturally that would work in any other e-commerce field. So I'm joking, but what was it like then going into other verticals, going into selling different types of products? What were some of the successes and failures and setbacks?
Yeah. So I took the approach of, if I'm going to do this, I need to learn about marketing, right? I need to learn, like, what does marketing mean? And then how can I apply that to the medium that I'm choosing to go into? And I chose email for several reasons that I said, but also because it was, even though it's like one of the oldest forms of digital marketing, it was just now getting good, right? Like before it was like spray and play. Now you can do all this stuff with data, with information, with segments, with lists. You can integrate it to stuff, and it's like becomes a lot more fluid. Excuse me. And so I took the approach of, hey, if I could learn the fundamentals of marketing, if I could learn the fundamentals of what the customer lifecycle is for e-commerce companies, then I think that I could build a plug and play system that would work across brands, right? If you think about it, like any e-commerce store or business, really, the customer lifecycle is about the same. And for each part of the customer lifecycle, you just want to have specific goals to get them from one phase to the next. So if they're just visiting your site or learning about your site, like, you should give them information to indoctrinate them into your brand. If they're like an actual lead and they're signing up for email lists or interested in connecting with someone, like, give them reviews. If they're a new customer, how do you get them to become a new customer into a repeat customer, and so forth? And that's kind of the mindset I went with in creating a system and a process. And that's worked for almost every business we've worked with. There's some businesses where if they just have a crappy product, like a lot of drop shipping businesses, that was a big phase for a while. It was really hard to get email up and going because the products, like, people just didn't want to buy. There's bad products.
Yeah. How do you get, for you as a writer or your team writing, how do you get fluent with a product and get passionate enough about it to find something interesting, especially if it's a more dry or boring topic or product?
Yeah, I think that's a really interesting question for any sort of marketer, right? Is where does that passion come from? And to be honest, like, it's not always there for the product. What writers get passionate about, and I'm not doing a lot of the writing at all or the design or anything like that, but my team, it's about how do they improve their overall copy skills, right? How do they improve their overall design skills? How could we take something that's boring and view it as a challenge to turn it into something that's interesting, right? And then so the focus becomes, hey, if I'm not passionate about this product, I am passionate about copy, and how could I use my skills to make this product work? Does that kind of make sense?
Yep. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And, you mentioned that recruiting was a important skill before, and it's become an important skill for you now. And you just mentioned a second ago, you're not doing the writing anymore. So what stage of the business are you at right now? What do you find yourself focused on, the most important use of your time at the stage of the business you're at now?
Yeah, I think that for me, where we are now, we're about 50 employees as an agency, and, over a dozen copywriters, dozen designers, and some strategists that are just stellar marketers. And so for me, it's how do I continue to kind of pound the drum on the vision, right? So my vision is, hey, if we could help 1,000 e-commerce stores earn over $1 million in revenue a year, that kind of translates into like hundreds of thousands of products for these people to be sent out all over the country or world, but also into actual jobs in e-commerce. So for me, like, I went into e-commerce not really knowing what it was going to be. Now it's exploding. And so the idea is, like, if we could generate $1 million for each of our clients, or more, like, that's 10 jobs that are being created, right? Because a lot of times you can kind of translate like, $100,000 a position, depending on your margin where you are and stuff like that. So it's kind of like the estimate. So 1,000 e-commerce companies, $1 million, it's 10,000 potential jobs. Coming out of I came out of like the 2008 recession. My family lost a lot. I knew a lot of other people that lost their jobs. And so it's just kind of like, that's something that's been ingrained with me. And getting people to learn new skills, I think is killer too. So that's kind of the long-term mission.
Talk to me about what it was like starting not one business, but two with your best friend.
Yeah. When we first started Go Be Savvy, which was the UX design agency, being friends, we kind of assumed that we would work really well together. But what we realized quickly was that there was a big power imbalance in regards to knowledge. And so that first year that we worked together was me catching up to him, right? Like I knew how to sell and things like that, but I didn't know anything about the industry, marketing, anything like that. And so it didn't really work out because we weren't optimizing our skill sets. When we parted ways, he started focusing on e-commerce, like building an e-commerce store, which he built up 2 different e-commerce stores. And I started focusing on email. Our knowledge gap started to decrease. And we were in California, like on vacation together. And we're like, hey, why don't we just combine forces again? Like we've really understand what our strengths are, what our weaknesses are, because we've gone through the fire, right? We've gone through that. And let's see what we can make happen this time around. And the biggest thing we focused on was that why, that vision, that mission that I think has led to our success over this last, year and a half, 2 years.
Yeah. And not having been from the world of e-commerce, how did you get those early, you had a success with the mattress company, but oftentimes that can take a while to lead to more referrals. But what was the secret to getting more clients when, I imagine early on, especially you got questions from other e-commerce store owners asking, well, do you have an e-commerce store? So how did you get especially the early clients?
Yeah, luckily for Gobi Savvy, we had worked with several, and those kind of became the first referrals, right? The clients that we did UX design for, we did a really good job for them, and they wanted to work with us to do email. I ended up doing like 2 or 3 weeks worth of just hardcore research on email marketing, figuring out what are the best softwares, what are the best systems. I had this huge Google document of what are flows, what are automations, what are examples. And I just kind of pieced everything together. I call it a Frankenstein email system based off of years of research and new things coming out. And, for instance, if I wanted to learn what a cart abandonment flow was, I would get 10 or 15 different articles explaining best practices, and they'd all be different, right? They'd all say like different things. So I was like, okay, what does it make sense to me? And I would kind of piece that together. And then I started kind of becoming known in the freelance world. I think I was one of the first people to do specifically email marketing and kind of niche into that. So it just became like I had a profile on Upwork, and it just became top rated. And then clients just started to flood in. Honestly, it just kind of took off from there. I think I got lucky in a lot of ways in timing. But it was also a result of actually performing really good work.
Yeah. Yeah. What have some of the challenges been for you as we record this near the end of 2020 and we're 9 months, 10 months into this pandemic? E-commerce has been just been a flood of business to that sector. What has the last year been like for you?
Yeah, it's just been trying to keep up. Like there's so much demand for e-commerce agencies, whether you're doing email marketing or CRO or Facebook ads or Amazon ads or whatever. The demand like all of a sudden tripled or quadrupled, or some people are like at 10x. I'm like, what are the numbers for that? But it's just kind of keeping up, right? And figuring out, as email blows up, there's a lot more competition. I think the bigger challenges are from a perspective of there's Gmail, there's Apple Mail, there's Outlook, there's all these different kind of mailing platforms. And one of the challenges in email is every email you send is going to look different on every platform, right? So it's kind of figuring out what do we do there. And as more people start to email, like this Black Friday, more people than ever sent out emails. Like it was ridiculous.
Yeah.
And so it's just kind of like those things, like keeping up with trends and figuring out, like in the past, I worked out what are the best practices. Now we're trying to figure out what are going to be the best practices as we move forward.
As you reflect on this year and going through this growth spurt when there have been so many other companies and businesses failing, struggling, and having that background, having a previous business that failed for you and family that lost a lot during 2008, what has it meant for you in order to, again, harking back to your mission, be able to help provide jobs at a time when a lot of people are losing jobs?
Yeah. And, personally, we've been able to hire, right? So for my own agency, we hired this year around 25 or 30 people, which has been amazing.
So you doubled this year.
Doubled this year. And then many of our clients have doubled. So And I'm not saying I'm directly responsible for their growth because e-commerce is on a wave. So everyone grew, everyone's riding this wave. But what I think is amazing about email in particular is that it's not just a revenue generator, it's a profit generator. So for example, if you want to get 100,000 visitors to your site, you have to pay for that, right? Through PPC, whether it's Facebook or Google or whatever. So you have to pay more for more visitors. But as you collect more emails, and now we're also doing SMS marketing, if you collect more emails, the cost to send 10,000 emails versus 100,000 emails, it's like $1,000 difference.
Yeah.
Right. So all of a sudden you're getting all these people that you've built up over time at no cost, almost no cost other than your cost of goods. Right.
Yeah.
And so what happens is your profit starts to scale versus just revenue. Because how many times have you heard like people's revenue is good, but their profit margin sucks?
Right. Especially in e-commerce.
Especially in e-commerce. Yeah.
Yeah. What a lot of companies in e-commerce struggle with. Yeah. It's really thin margins. Yeah. And then, as you look to the future at this end of 2020, going to 2021, what gets you excited? What are you excited about in the field?
Oh, I think e-commerce is becoming easier than ever before. I think companies like Shopify and Amazon are going to catapult that even further, and they're starting to compete with each other in a lot of ways. So I think the products are going to get better. I think it's still a really easy barrier to entry. Like I think almost anyone can do it. You saw that restaurants got into e-commerce. Like there's so many so many restaurants around me that like are now on Shopify, right? Which I think is amazing. And like they're sending like cart abandonment emails when I go to like buy a thing of sushi, I'm like, this is really cool. So I'm excited for that, just for that growth and just continued growth in that field. Yeah.
You are from Bend, Oregon, which I visited earlier this year, fell in love with it. Such a cool town. Someone told me that it's just like one of the highest degrees of self-employed people. Maybe you told me that or something like that. Do you think that made you a natural entrepreneur, or how did that affect you growing up in a town that has a lot of people that are self-employed or that are working remotely for other companies?
Yeah, I think when I was growing up there, that wasn't the actual reality. When I grew up, there was like 40,000 people, and when 2008 hit, like everyone was out of work. It was a ghost town.
Wow,
it was really crazy. But as the internet started to evolve from 2008 to, I really think 2015 was like the big sort of starting wave. It's now it's got about 100,000 people that live there, and 50% of the workforce is remote.
That's what it was. Okay. That's what I'd heard then. So I want to wrap things up with the two questions I always ask, which is number one, I'm a big fan of gratitude. So looking around at others in your field, other peers, who else do you admire? Who else do you respect?
Yeah, there's an agency I follow. They've been around for a while. They're called Hawk Media. And they just seem, I've never worked with them or spoken with them, but the stuff they post really like cries out like a great culture internally. I'm not sure how they do with their clients or things like that. I'm assuming they're successful, but it really seems like their vision and mission is in line with ours. And I respect that quite a bit. I think they're out of Santa Monica or California or something like that.
Yeah. Cool. And then, let's pretend we're at an awards banquet, much like the Oscars or the Emmys. You're receiving an award, Dean, for lifetime achievement for everything you've done up until this point. And who do you thank? In addition to family and friends, who are the mentors, who are the teachers, who are the business partners along the way who you acknowledge?
Yeah, I had a teacher in high school. His name was Brian Tebow, and he was an economics and psychology teacher. I remember like junior year of high school, we're like learning about economics and stuff and real estate and all this. And he was like the first person to say to me like, "Hey, you're probably going to be an entrepreneur, aren't you?" I was like what? He's like, "Yeah. Like look at the way you're looking at these numbers and everything." So I'd thank him for kind of starting that seed in a lot of ways outside my family.
Yeah. Very cool. All right. Dean, where can people go to learn more about you and check you out, and website, LinkedIn, all that kind of stuff?
Yeah, you can find me on LinkedIn. It's just Dean Dutro. I'm probably the only one on there with that name. And then you can go to worthecommerce.com.
Excellent. All right, Dean. Thanks so much.
Cool. Thanks a lot.
Thank you for listening to the Smart Business Revolution podcast with John Corcoran. Find out more at smartbusinessrevolution.com. And while you're there, sign up for our email list and join the revolution.
Revolution.
And be listening for the next episode of the Smart Business Revolution podcast.